Do you have trouble speaking up for yourself and are afraid to upset others? Do you overcommit, are overly agreeable, and often find yourself in situations where you feel uncomfortable, resentful, or pressured to be in? If you are ready to stop living those experiences and start living a life where you feel empowered, confident, and have the ability to say, thanks, but I'm not available for that without getting heart palpitations, then this episode is just for you. Today, I'm talking about what's been called the disease to please, people pleasing, what it is, the hidden dangers behind it, how to recognize when we're falling into it, and how you can start shifting your mindset today to start living your life in a healthier, happier way. But first, welcome to the Mindshift Mami Show. My name is Jazri, and I help women become successful and aligned with their authentic selves using the power of mind shifting. So first things first, let's define what it means to be a people pleaser. According to Merriam-Webster, a people pleaser is a person who has an emotional need to please others, often at the expense of their own needs or desires. People can develop people-pleasing tendencies due to all sorts of reasons. Beneath our people-pleasing lies a strong desire or need to be liked, or I believe an even stronger desire to not upset others. You may have been conditioned from childhood that the needs of others always came first before your own. Psychologists note that some children use people-pleasing as a coping mechanism to connect with parents who only show love under certain conditions, or with parents who are strict disciplinarians or just unpredictable in general. It's also baked into some cultures and some people's views about what it means to be a good woman, a good wife, a good mother, caregiver, worker, or friend, among other things. So we as women have to deal with this a lot. In fact, in a study that looked at unhealthy lifestyle patterns, people-pleasing was a coping mechanism that was used by the majority of the female participants, while only a minority of men showed similar tendencies. So how can we recognize when we're people-pleasing? Here's a list of 20 common scenarios for a people-pleaser. So listen closely and see if there's any you can relate to. They find it hard to say no. They agree to do things they don't want to do. They accept projects with unrealistic deadlines. They take on more than they can handle because they don't want to disappoint others. They constantly shift their own plans and schedule to accommodate others' needs. They have trouble setting boundaries between their work and personal time. They take responsibility for making people feel better if they're upset. They try to help people even when they're not asking for it. They apologize for things that aren't their fault. They have a hard time asking for help. They show people warmth when it's not warranted. They flatter people even when they don't like them. They want to appear perfect. They go out of their way to avoid conflict. They feel miserable when they've upset or disappointed someone. They disregard their own feelings because they don't want to jeopardize a relationship. They hold their opinion back to maintain harmony. They seek frequent reassurance. They have a hard time directing people, like children or employees, to do things. And they get overscheduled and overburdened often. Looking at this list, just a year ago, I was actively participating in at least 14 out of 20 of these things. Now, I can say by simply practicing deconditioning techniques over the last year or so, I'm down to about 5 out of 20 of these behaviors, which is amazing. One of those deconditioning techniques is simply becoming more aware as to why we become people pleasers in the first place, which is what we're going to dive into a little deeper now. We're going to get a little nerdy here. Okay. So think about the automatic defense responses our bodies and minds go into when we protect ourselves. We always hear about like my fight or flight kicked in, right? So those are examples. There's fight or flight, and there's also freeze and fawn and a few others, but those are the more popular ones. So if you had a parent, a caretaker, a family member, a partner, or anybody close in your life that made you feel responsible for their emotional state, people pleasing is a coping mechanism that you may have fallen into to feel safe. And people pleasing falls under the fawn category as an example of your behavior when it comes to those defense responses. Workaholics, over-explainers, and over-apologizers also fall under the fawn category, because to fawn is your body's stress response to please someone to avoid conflict. This trauma response stems from our innate need for like social connection and co-regulation, which is why it's very common to people please with your parents. This can look like not setting boundaries, always going along with what you think people want from you, or feeling guilty for needing something from someone. It can also involve conflict avoidance, neglecting healthy relationships, or being in relationships with people who have unrealistic expectations of you. Now, if you experienced these circumstances in childhood, especially from like a caregiver, you had no choice but to deal with them in the way that felt most safe. Please do not feel ashamed for doing what you automatically felt you had to do to be safe at that time. The issue becomes when we carry these unhealthy coping mechanisms into the relationships in our adult lives. Once we are fully able to make our own decisions, we don't want to continue making those decisions and choices from the unconscious patterns of our past. That's why it's so important that we do the work, the inner work, to educate ourselves, become self-aware and conscious of the behavior, and then practice changing it little by little. It doesn't have to be all at one time. It's probably impossible for you to fix it all at one time. Now we're going to talk about some of the hidden dangers of being a people pleaser, so you take this seriously. The thing is that people pleasing comes down to that it's a form of self-neglect. It's a maladaptive coping mechanism to anxiety, with maladaptive meaning poor, defective. It's not a great way to deal with things. You will feel a temporary relief when you people please. That's why we do it. It relieves that immediate anxiety that you're feeling in the moment. When you know you're not comfortable with what may be occurring, you may want to go against what the other person is saying, but you're more concerned about their possible negative reaction. So you choose to people please to relieve yourself of that anxiety that you're feeling in that moment. The problem with that is that it causes longer-term negative effects. Here are some examples the cost of people pleasing can lead to. First, there's just the emotional stuff: stress, anxiety, depression, overwhelm, exhaustion, burnout, which I have a whole episode dedicated to. But here's some more specific scenarios people pleasing often leads to. Taking on tasks that others should be doing. Downplaying our own ideas and inner wisdom. Having people take us for granted. Feeling used. Becoming dependent on external validation, aka what others think about you. Having dysfunctional relationships in which people end up liking us for the wrong reasons. Diminished authenticity, connection, and intimacy in our relationships. People not seeing how overstretched we are because we hide it so well. Others becoming dependent on us. Feeling stuck because we're not living life on our own terms. Losing our own sense of identity. Lower motivation and confidence, and feelings of frustration, anger, resentment, and bitterness, and then pain and regret. Now, I don't know about you, but hearing all these repercussions that people pleasing causes makes me realize even more that it is so worth attempting to overcome that little moment of stress that you may feel right before you decide you don't want to respond in a people-pleasing manner anymore. Also, please keep in mind, when we're talking about people-pleasing, we are not talking about healthy displays of care. You can be a caring person who values social connections and enjoys making others happy. Many people-pleasers do. People-pleasing as a maladaptive coping mechanism, however, is referring specifically to the chronic behavior that really stems from an underlying fear and feeling of anxiety. So when you're people-pleasing, you're not making other people pleased with you because you truly enjoy making them happy. You're doing it because you're afraid of making them potentially not happy. And you're ignoring what you truly would prefer to do or say instead. If you deep down feel that your own needs are not as important, or that you're going to be judged harshly based off of your decision, or that you're unworthy of respect and love, those fear-driven beliefs are what lead us to people please. By the way, those are all limited beliefs, which are ideas about yourself, others, or the world that could really prevent personal growth. Empowering beliefs are positive, helpful, and accurate beliefs about yourself that can help you take action and feel good. At the end of this episode, we're going to take some of these common limiting beliefs and transmute them, flip them on their heads into empowering beliefs that you can use as positive affirmations as part of your daily self-care practice to start shifting your mindset and building new neural pathways to eliminate people-pleasing tendencies. So, how do we begin the deconditioning process? As always, it starts with our mindset and making a shift in it. I'm going to discuss a few mindset shifts and then some behavior shifts you can begin to implement into your life. And number one is reflect on your life. Ask yourself the question, where does the people-pleasing come from? And then ask yourself, is it serving me now or harming me now? As I mentioned earlier, people-pleasing likely stems from past close relationships in your life. Don't feel shame. Instead, thank yourself for doing what you needed to do in the past to feel safe, and recognize where you are now in life. Become conscious to the fact that you don't have to continue that same maladaptive coping mechanism with your coworkers or your friends or your family members. Become aware of the pattern itself of how you respond. And remember that you have a choice to start responding differently by considering your wants and your desires first. Which leads me into point number 2. Part of the deconditioning process is making the mind shift that it is healthy and normal to set boundaries and say no, and that we're not responsible for how others feel about that no. Self-worth and confidence needs to be built from a foundation within ourselves, not from what others give us. When we are more concerned about someone's reaction to our response rather than how we ourselves feel about our response, that is us disempowering ourselves. Do not give your power over to others out of fear. Instead, practice making decisions that you're content with and be willing to accept whatever responses it may get. Essentially, this is all a part of us growing up, not allowing ourselves to be taken advantage of, and not feeling responsible for someone else's emotions. The same way people aren't responsible for yours. So why would you be responsible for anybody else's? Now, here are some behavior changes that you can practice that will help you release many people-pleasing tendencies. Number 1, slow down, sailor. Buy yourself some time. When you're asked to do something, don't answer right away. Take a pause. Check in with your emotions. Is a request bringing up overwhelm, resentment, anxiety, or guilt if you say no? Our immediate urge to agree to all requests is the thing that's been getting us into trouble as people pleasers. Let the person know you need some time to consider the request, and you'll get back to them within a few days or by the end of the day, depending on the ask or whatever it is. You need to give yourself plenty of time to process it. Give yourself more time than you think you need, because you need to consider it in the context of your other obligations, what it is you're actually comfortable with truly doing, and then you can craft an appropriate response. And an easy thing you can say to respond to something like this, to give yourself some time, is to say something like, let me think about that, and I'll get back to you with my answer. Number 2, scrutinize the request and the person it's coming from. Consider whether the person might be taking advantage of you. Healthy relationships are reciprocal, with both people giving and taking. You need to ask yourself, is there a pattern with this particular person who's asking me, taking advantage of me in the past? Are they somebody who's always trying to get you to do things that they want? Pay attention to whether you truly even want to help or not. Think before committing. Here's some copy-paste ways that you can practice saying no to people. This first one might be kind of a work one, but something like, I don't have the bandwidth to assist with this, but here are some resources that might help. Send them a couple links, but you're busy. You can't be doing whatever extra tasks they're telling you. Here's a simple general one. I'd love to help you, but I have a lot going on in this moment, and I don't have space for this. Somebody asking you to go somewhere, but you don't want to go. Thanks for asking, but I'm not available. Point blank period. I wish I could, but there are other things I need to say yes to. And finally, I wish I could help, but I'm unable to commit to anything additional at the moment. Any kind of rendition of that, go ahead and try it out. Now, number 3, behavior change, time block. Make sure you're blocking out times in your calendar that are off limits to outside requests, because they're already preserved for your own priorities. That makes it easier, because then they become an automatic no for people, except in extraordinary circumstances or in things that you actually do want to do. Number 4, build up your self-worth and assertiveness. This is key to develop. The more self-worth and confidence and assertiveness you have, the more natural it's going to feel to put your needs first. You need to give yourself self-love and positive reinforcement as you're building up these new habits. So this means reward yourself for maintaining your boundaries. Every time you give somebody a no or say something you truly want, hug yourself, give yourself a high five, tell yourself you're proud of yourself, build up that muscle that your wants and desires matter. Treat yourself and allow yourself to celebrate those small wins. And those time blocks that you put in earlier, make sure you're filling it with actual self-care activities. Start repeating positive affirmations to yourself that will help you subconsciously decondition people-pleasing habits over time. Also, you can check out my video on how to rebuild your confidence for more tips on self-worth and confidence. So number 5, seek help from a mentor, a coach, or a therapist. When you're working with a professional on these specific coping mechanisms, it can really give you a turbo boost in your improvements over a shorter period of time than it might take for you to be working by yourself. Working with a professional can help keep you accountable to yourself and make sure that you truly commit to this journey. And number 6, repeat your approaches for overcoming people-pleasing again and again and again. To develop new habits, we need to repeat them often. That's going to help rewire our brains and reset other people's expectations of us. People treat us how we allow them to. And we don't have to stay those past versions of ourselves just because that's what other people might be used to. You get to change who you are whenever you decide you want to, without explanation to anybody. You get to upgrade. You get to upgrade to you 2.0, 3.0. They didn't get the new upgrade. Oh well, you did. Go ahead and do that. Listen, deconditioning ourselves from behaviors that we've been unconsciously participating in for likely all of our lives up until this point is no easy task. Please remember, be gentle with yourself as you take this all on, and look at these mindset and behavior shifts as a lifelong practice. It's a practice, okay? Progress is not linear. There's going to be days that you regress, and there's going to be some days that you feel unstoppable. The important thing is to just remain conscious and do one small act of love for yourself a little more each day. Because honestly, the more we just build up our self-worth, your worthiness, the more your confidence grows and the less you're going to be willing to deal with anything that causes self-neglect. Which means the less we're willing to participate in any behavior that simply doesn't feel good to us anymore. This journey about aligning ourselves with our most authentic selves, it can be challenging, but it is also such an incredibly beautiful and rewarding homecoming to ourselves. So now I'd like to end this episode with a few empowering affirmations to help decondition yourself from people pleasing. So if you haven't really done affirmations before in your life, you need to know that they're necessary to repeat over and over, like a long period of time, until they become normalized and comfortable. So it's common to experience feelings of anxiety or like uncomfortableness or awkwardness when you're first doing them. But over time, I promise you, the discomfort will decrease and you will have conditioned yourself to learn a new language of speaking to yourself with compassion and mindfulness rather than a language of criticism, demand, judgment, and fear that you might have been programmed with. If it is safe for you to do, you can place your hand on your heart and repeat after me. Every day, I prioritize my own needs and well-being. Every day, I prioritize my own needs and well-being. It is okay to say no to others and yes to myself. It is okay to say no to others and yes to myself. Speaking my wants and needs is a sign of self-respect. Speaking my wants and needs is a sign of self-respect. I am strong and resilient and can handle whatever comes my way. I am strong and resilient and can handle whatever comes my way. I am capable of expressing my boundaries respectfully and assertively. I am capable of expressing my boundaries respectfully and assertively. I am deserving of love and care, especially from myself. I am deserving of love and care, especially from myself. Thank you so much for being with me here today. I hope this information was helpful for you, and I hope to see you in another episode. Remember, keep shifting those minds, and I will see you next week. Take care.